My name is DIANN McCabe, and I was part of the Institute of Cultural Affairs when we did 200 town meetings, well, and many more before that, in the state of Mississippi. And we had staff from Memphis and Pace, Mississippi, who worked together along with teams of people who often would come from other parts of the South or the other parts of the country. Once my husband traveled with a woman from India, and that always made a big stir when he'd go into a rural Mississippi town. But my memory of these town meetings were such that, especially with the governor's sponsorship, we had a lot of credibility going into the towns, and we could drive up and say, "Hi, I'm DIANN McCabe with the Institute of Cultural Affairs, and I'm here to ask you to do a town meeting the governor's office is sponsoring." And people listened to that. They didn't think we were kooks. And we would go into a town and ask, just from someone in a store, who in this town really cares about the town. And we were always given a name or two, and we would go find these people, knock on their doors, and ask them if they would call together a cross-section of the community to hear about the idea of doing a town meeting, because we're doing them all over this area, and people wanted to be part of that. So they would do it, and we would come back for this planning meeting where we would have people introduce themselves, and we would do a demonstration of the town meeting. In about 10 minutes or so, we would ask this small gathering what were their hopes and dreams for the community, and we would write those down, and what's standing in the way of those hopes and dreams, and we'd write those down and have a little discussion, and then we would look at what are some things people in this town could do to deal with what's standing in the way of those hopes and dreams. And they would come up with some really interesting things just in that very brief amount of time, and they loved it because they had a way to think positively about the town but realistically about it. And they would always schedule a town meeting for like the next week, and these town meetings themselves lasted about 3 hours, and we would come in and set it up and so forth. But as we were planning it, they would have to decide who to invite, how would they publicize the town meeting, and this was often word of mouth or contacting groups and so forth. And if it was a white group we were meeting with, often they would ask, especially in the Delta, should we invite black people? And we never answered that directly. We would just ask, well, what do you think, whatever's best for your town? And they would look at each other and nod and say, yes, we will do that. We will invite them. But then they'd have to decide, are we going to have refreshments? And we'd let them decide that. We'd say most towns do. It's a way to get the community together. And they realize we've never eaten together with black people. So they would have to make that decision, and they almost always did. And many of these town meetings were held in a place where blacks and whites had never come together, especially eaten together and talked together. And I know after one town meeting, one of the organizers came up to me and he said, you know, I've never realized that black people had anything to say or thought about the town. And he really was a different person, and it was all very indirect in how this happened, and therefore very powerful, I think. So we did town meetings all over the state. My husband claims he's been in every human settlement except for one. And we learned a lot. And that was a time, I think, in Mississippi of great openness to this kind of effort. And we were real lucky to have been there at that time.